artificial intelligence, digital and data. Whether you're a business leader, developer, or a data scientist, this is the perfect place to discuss ideas and connect with others who are pushing the boundaries of what's possible. Join us in today's show as we explore the frontiers of AI, data, and digital. Let's learn, grow, and innovate together.
Hello and welcome to Socrates Digital Garden. I'm Michelle Jeno.
And I'm Sonia Walker.
And welcome to our show. We're so excited for you to be joining us today for what's going to be an action-packed and amazing, incredible show. I'm Michelle Jeno and I'm the CEO and founder of On Purpose Transformation, where we're so super excited about supporting our clients to go from good to great in all things technology, transformation and mindset.
And I'm Sonia Walker. I sit on boards and provide advisory services and have sat on international IT companies for many years, including IBM, Infor, Oracle, RSA, Security, SAS and SAP.
So between the two of us, we have an extensive background across consulting, advisory and technology in not only the big end of town, but also with small to medium-sized businesses. And what we want to do and what we hope to do through the show is to bring some of that specialist IT and executive knowledge to you, so you too can hear about the sorts of things that behind closed doors are only typically reserved for those million-dollar companies. And today, what we're going to do is talk about ChatGPT. As lifelong educators and people that Sonia and I have a passion for helping people to understand things and what it means, we're here to talk to you today about ChatGPT. Well, what is ChatGPT? We've used a fabulous article by Will Douglas Heaven in the MIT Technology Review to actually answer that question. Now, I've taken his information, so I credit all of the information to him and put it into this diagram. This overnight success that we now know as ChatGPT has actually started its technology roots way back in the 1980s. The recurrent neural networks that they talk about in this article started in the 1980s. And for those of you that aren't aware of a neural network, think of it as being like in our own human brains and in animals, we have these neurons or these pathways that actually connect different areas of the brain together. So what the ChatGPT is it's back in the 80s, it was a language model that used these neural networks to join together these sequences of words, but they were slow to train and they forgot previous words that had been used. The next advance came about 1997 with the long short-term memory with Sepp Hochreiter and Jürgen Schmidhuber. And what this did was allow past data to be input into a sequence for longer and to be retained for longer. So it could essentially handle strings of text of a lot larger, of 100 words long. But again, the language skills with all of this were very limited. The big breakthrough came through in 2017 when some Google researchers developed what are known as transformers. These transformers allowed not just these words and the sequence of the words to be understood, but also the context of those words, which was an important leap forward. So you now not only had strings of data or strings of words, but you also had context that could be written in, and this is known as transformers. In 2018 and 19, GPT and GPT-2. So GPT means Generative Pre-trained Transformer. These were released, which use the transformers and also something that's important, which is the unsupervised learning. Many of the models up until this point had actually used supervised learning for the models and the machines. So this was, again, just like transformers, another big breakthrough in that they were now using unsupervised learning to train these models. And then in 2020 came the big release of GPT-3, and that was where, it was, again, just like transformers, another great leap forward in terms of the technology. Its ability to generate human-like text was a big leap forward so that it could summarize documents, generate stories, and translate. One of the problems, though, with GPT-3 was that it absorbed all the information, the good and the bad, and the hate speech. So one of the problems that they then needed to sort out was how could the model know what was real, what was not real, because it was just information and words to it up until then, and also know what was harmful or nasty as opposed to just words. It didn't have a way of interpreting any of that. So in 2022, they developed InstructGPT. InstructGPT went back to using human testers so that the model could learn what was not offensive to people and what was conversational as well. And then, as we know, in November 2022, InstructGPT was released to the public as ChatGPT. And wow, what a phenomenal reception it's actually received. So let's take a look now. What does ChatGPT mean? What does it mean to me, to businesses, and to community or society as a whole?
What does ChatGPT mean to you, to your businesses, and more broadly speaking, the community? It's a tool, it's a technology, and I think it's a really good way to think about another tool in the kit bag that we have for technology. So it's transformative, and that's what makes it also interesting and why it's garnished so much media attention. If you take a step back and think about the way that you used to look up research would be I'd go to the dictionary, I'd go to my encyclopedia and pick it up and look it up. And of course, that's surpassed, we no longer do it. ChatGPT is here to stay, there's no doubt about that. But why it's interesting is because if you think of the same as using a Google search engine to do research today, instead, moving forward, you'll be interacting with a computer using a human experience that's focused on back-end technology, which has algorithms that will take that input that you provide as a human and interpret that and provide information back to you. So it's really fantastic. It will transform businesses. It will improve the human engagement experience with technology, and it will also provide productivity improvements, obviously across a realm of different industries.
I can really hear how passionate you are in talking about that. You know, it's another technology, is another tool. ChatGPT is yet another tool in amongst many tools that we have. And you had a really good example that we were talking about the other day of the importance of using common sense and still being in charge of whatever that tool is.
Yeah, Michelle, I think it's great because it is going to change the way we interact with technology. But the core piece is, while there's a media storm, it's a tool. And where we focus on the human element is that common sense, intellect piece. So the example was years ago, we'd have global positioning systems. We all have them in our cars, GPS, to get from A to B with a map. And my husband was riding his motorbike. There was a main bitumen road through a national park with a bridge, and the GPS actually had directed him in parallel to a road 20 to 50 metres away that was a dirt track. And as it turned out, that had a dead end and he would have ridden his motorbike off a cliff chasm. So of course he used his common sense and went, this isn't right. This isn't giving me quite the right reactions, and it's only as good as the algorithms and the calculations in the back end of the technology. So as the technology improves, so will the human experience. And I think as we as humans take that common sense approach to how can we use this technology to deliver outcomes, to provide benefit to the way we work. And that's the key.
Thanks, Sonia. If I was to think about what does ChatGPT mean to me as an individual, there are a number of areas that we can talk about, and the research that we've done for the show has shown just how topical this is. But probably the first area to start in is to look at the greater access to information that we're now going to have. ChatGPT and the access and the way that it will give us access to information is very different to your traditional search engine on something like a Google or a Bing. So the thing to talk about and look at is what does that mean? You know, to some people watching, like myself, you know, we grew up using a paper-based dictionary to look up what does this word mean, what does that word mean? And we've evolved a long way from there into now having search engines where we can say, what does this mean or what does that mean? And ChatGPT will be another giant leap step forward from there, where you can actually say, well, what does this mean? And have a conversation. Whereas you're formulating your ideas in having that conversation with ChatGPT, you'll be able to explore more and more in different areas. What this can lead to is, yes, information overload, because you can have too much information and then you're going, well, is all of this relevant or isn't it relevant? And maybe perhaps not quite know. But that expansion of the amount of information you have to is something to really keep note of. It wasn't really that long ago, if you think about it, that reading and writing was actually reserved just for the rich, for people working in the religious orders. And it's only been perhaps like from the mid-1900s that more and more everyday people now can read and write. And gee, haven't we come a long way from there, where not only can everyday people read and write now, but we all have access to the same information, much of which was only available to very rich or very exclusive communities before now. Perhaps another side effect of this greater amount of information and the greater amount of personalisation around that information, already if you look at your Netflix or Google or Facebook, a lot of the information that you may receive back is because the algorithms have already taken into account your previous preferences and are feeding those back to you. So this bias that you may already be in a loop in some way, may mean that going forward, as the technology gets smarter, you actually become stuck in that kind of bias. And what it may mean is that you'll hear less and less of opposite opinions or different opinions. And so sometimes, and we can see this in different countries at the moment, it may get to the point where you don't even understand how people can be thinking the way that they're thinking, because all of the media, all of the news that you've had feeding into your world and into your social media world has actually just reflected your biases. And so when you hear something different, it almost doesn't compute. So yes, the personalization from having more and more data that these AIs have, and ChatGPT has, may also mean that you need to be aware that those already biases that you have, and everybody has them, may actually become more amplified as you have similar information fed to you that perhaps you don't have those opportunities like you would have back in the day of a dictionary or even with a search engine, where unusual stuff may have come up and it may have triggered a different way of thinking or a different perspective. You may not have that ability going forward. And perhaps another area where it's going to have one of those biggest effects is around the efficiency. Just think back to those days of looking through those paper dictionaries or searching through Google searches. The efficiency and the speed with which you get this information now through something like ChatGPT is going to be so much faster. Now, they used to say that it takes 10,000 hours to be doing something to become a master at it. I'm not sure what it's going to be like in the days post-GPT, where perhaps GPT can do that research for you and look through all of the things that you would have learnt and synthesize it for you. So instead of perhaps taking 10,000 hours, it may take 1,000 hours to learn the core elements. I still think you would need to learn them, but to learn the core elements of what it would take to be a master in a subject. This theme about increased efficiencies and increased speed with which things can work carries over into what ChatGPT means for business. So not only are we looking at many areas where jobs and processes and systems flows can be automated, so there's an increase in the volume that can be handled, but it's also the speed with which these inquiries can be handled. So there's stories already coming through more and more around retail businesses who have a chatbot that is an actual automated voice and can actually respond just like you're having a conversation. So instead of a text, like on ChatGPT, you're having a conversation with that chatbot, and the speed with which it can answer, where is my package, what's happened with this, what's happened with that, is of course faster than a human could actually do. The interesting elements around that are, of course, the displacement within the organisations as they perhaps transition from the employees that were in call centres to using this type of AI technology. But it's also what type of jobs, like what role description do you even begin to create now for how to set up those workflow processes. around what is a human interaction and what parts are done by something like a ChatGPT. Having worked in technology for many, many years now and seeing giggle or garbage in, garbage out many a time, it's hard sometimes for people to understand that it comes back to the algorithm. What information is already there to begin with? If the information in your current systems is a lot of meaningless information, then it doesn't matter whether you've got an old legacy system or whether you're using ChatGPT. You still have garbage in your systems. You may have customers in databases that you've got 10 records of, etc. But perhaps the key thing there around the algorithms is this discrimination and bias. The statistics are pretty damning, but many agree that it's around 90% of CEOs and organisations are men, and their first names are John. So imagine that you're using an algorithm for your recruitment process for a new CEO, and you're instructing that program to look at, who's been the most successful historically, and use that to help us screen through the applications that we've received. The likelihood is that out of all the applications you receive, you will then get back from something like ChatGPT 5 male applications, and probably at least 3 of them would be named John. Now that's because the algorithm hasn't had enough data or enough parameters placed into it to actually say, well, we know on previous experience that traditionally it's been 90% male and they've been named John. But we actually want to look at these parameters based on our current organisation and our social values, etc., that we want to expand on these other important parameters so that we have more diversity and more inclusion in the organisation, starting from the CEO down. One of the key areas that things like ChatGPT can also help in is definitely around improved decision making. Now, with this increased volume of information and data and the tools to be able to sift through all of those different data points, yes, there will be better decisions made because there'll be more information available to make those decisions. But again, going back to the quality of the information to begin with. I know from a perspective of a consumer, the personalised marketing is something that people will prefer, having that much better experience where you're only having things that you want to be looking at, sent to you. Amazon's a great example of that, where when you use their site, they've already done a lot of personalisation. And so you get things and you get shown things that are relevant to what you're actually looking for when you go shopping there. I think it's also important to remember that Gartner, one of the leading consultancies in this space, brought out their Industry 4.0 back in 2015. TCS brought out their Business 4.0 back in 2018. So these concepts and this revolution that's about to happen have been around for a number of years now. And even, just thinking about how long has the conversation about driverless cars been going on. So the technology is, yes, definitely out there. Yes, the speed with which it's being implemented is increasing. But before thinking that, yes, this year all of our automation ideas will be solved, just to keep in mind that sometimes the speed with which this implementations are happening is actually a bit slower than some of the media hype might have you believe. There's a funny example of that for me personally in this last couple of weeks, where I received a letter. Yeah, it seems strange to be receiving letters nowadays. I received a letter from a large telco. I haven't been with that telco for about 15 years, and suddenly I received this letter telling me that I was in credit for 15 cents. Now, I'm not sure what prompted this, going back to the Gigo idea of what sort of data and systems do they have. But it's that kind of, especially for large organisations, that kind of cleanup of your current information that would actually then be something that would need to be taken into account before going, oh yes, we're going to implement all of this great AI technology. Because of, I think the key thing here is whatever tool that's being used, it's important to keep in mind that if your core data or your core systems or your core people are not quite as effective and not quite as agile as you need, then it doesn't matter whether it's ChatGPT that we're talking about. there's still core fundamentals within the organisation, such as why are we sending letters to customers saying that they're 15 cents in credit. The final area that we're going to look at today is what does ChatGPT mean for society, and what does having this discussion about AI and the implications of AI data and digital mean for society as a whole. Now, in researching for this, one of the funniest things I came across was that John Connor was the name, of course, of the young kid in all of those Terminator movies that went on and became the worldwide leader of the humans' revolution against the machines. So I did find it quite ironic that when reminiscing about Terminator and that franchise, that even in that, the worldwide leader's first name was John. So I did think it funny that they might have done the research like I did about the number of CEOs and the first names of those CEOs. But it goes to not just that bias or continuation like we spoke about earlier. It also goes to that idea that we have around the future and what vision have we been fed throughout many, many years now about what the future between us and machines and something like ChatGPT may be looking like. We've had many years and many shows across social media and media showing us that our future with technology is doomed, and that, as Christian Hammond in his TEDx talk on a new philosophy on artificial intelligence jokes, he says that in all of these representations, as soon as the machine becomes intelligent, it then decides that it's going to kill all of humanity. So I think that this is an important, again, understanding to have about the mindset that we have, and we've kind of culturally had ingrained in us, that when looking at and using, whether it's ChatGPT, there are those two sides to it for us. One is the exciting, this is going to make life faster and easier. And the other side, once it understands how we work as human beings, it's then going to decide to kill us. It would be hard to argue that there aren't going to be large societal upheavals, but at the same time, if you look at somewhere like your local supermarket, where we used to have checkout operators for all of the different checkouts, and slowly they got rid of the checkouts and made it a mass production line where you were doing all your items yourself, and then they realised that they actually needed to bring back some of those larger escalators, and conveyors, and so they brought those back, and now they've got basically us doing the role of a checkout operator. So it's one of those things where it may be that over time and ideally, at some point we will walk into a shop and just scan the barcodes and not need to scan things on a conveyor at the end. But those transitions, what I'm trying to say is that those transitions didn't lead to people standing outside of the shop going, please, let me stand there and scan food all day. What people recognised was that these repetitive tasks and these very much boring tasks could be done easier, cheaper, faster with automated technology. So there will be this structural adjustment within society and within organisations and roles, but how much of that leads to large-scale, rioting and protests, and how much of it is just these adjustments, say like the supermarket, where they experiment for a little while and see what we, the guinea pigs, the consumers, will and won't do for ourselves. So that's it for the Socrates Digital Garden Show for today. We've talked about what is ChatGPT, what it means to you, to your business and to the community. And we hope that we've raised some interesting questions and ideas that you go forward and think about some more, especially as AI, digital and technology gets rolled out more and more into our everyday lives.
Thanks for joining us for the show today, and we hope you enjoyed it.
And we look forward to seeing you again at the future shows where we talk some more about all things to do with technology like ChatGPT.
And all things AI,
data
and digital.
We look forward to seeing you soon.